All right. So here we are with reaction to the Pegula and Beane press conference about Sean McDermott getting fired. One thing I wanted to touch upon, whether one person watches this or a million people, Bills fans need to relax. Okay. Um, there's been a lot of things being said since the press conference, which ended a few hours back. In the end, the result is what it is. Sean McDermott needed to be fired. He was not going to be the guy to lead this team to the Super Bowl. That was clear. He had 9 chances, 8 of them with Josh Allen, and it was not going to happen. Time and time again, he came up short. Now, again, I'm a big believer that coaches get too much credit when a team wins and they get too much blame when a team loses. With that being said, I think there's been a variety of times that his decisions or his conservative mentality has absolutely affected the Bills. I mean, anybody can go back to the 13 seconds game against the Chiefs 5 years ago. But game in, game out, he plays very tight. He coaches very tight. He coaches very conservatively. One of the things I talk about game in and game out have been for years is that if it's third and one, 4 and 1, or fourth and one, third and two, something like that, he consistently will only have 4 down linemen when it's clear that it's going to be a QB sneak or a run up the middle by the running back. And they get 2, 3, 4 yards at a clip, the offense. Why? Because we have nobody in there to clog up the hole, especially when we know it's going to be a quarterback sneak or it's likely going to be a quarterback sneak. It becomes very evident. If I know that, I'm an idiot, that the offensive counterpart, they know that, and they're going to take advantage of that. And time again, they do. He has a bend but don't break mentality as a coach, and it's cost us too many times. It seems to do decently and win in the regular season, but when it comes to when it matters most, his team fails, plain and simple. And yes, the players are the ones that are ultimately failing, but I think oftentimes he's putting them in a position to fail far too often. Another thing would be where let's say it's 3rd and 12. Instead of having guys in and around the first down marker, they're 8 yards behind the first down marker. If it's 3rd and 12, the opposing team completes a 10-yard pass and is easily able to run 2, 3, 4 yards to get the first down. That happened time and time again for years. You just knew it was going to happen. And that's a direct result of his coaching style and the positions that he puts his players. That's not the player's fault. So whether people like it or not, whether people like the way it was handled in terms of some people feel like Brandon Beane should have gotten the heave ho, so they see him get promoted and then McDermott get fired. All of a sudden, everybody's on Sean McDermott's side. I don't get it. It's not one or the other. I'm not saying Brandon Beane is not culpable in all this. He certainly is. I felt like this year's roster was by far the worst roster on paper that we've seen in 5 years, probably. Now, part of that I do think is the salary cap's tighter, partially due to Josh Allen's contract. But some of these extensions he's made are not the best money, bang for the buck money value. But more so in the end, it didn't matter. They were not going to get it done with Sean McDermott as head coach. It just was not going to happen. I mean, he's had 9 years. There's not one single coach in the history of the NFL that has been at one spot for 9 years, never been to a Super Bowl, and to go and win. It's never happened, not a once. The closest one, I believe, might be John Madden, who I think was in his 7th or 8th year with the Raiders when they went and won in the really in that really fantastic season they had. But that's the closest that I can think of. But I know for a fact there has been one for 9 years where that's been the case. So, I feel sorry for Sean McDermott, the man, because I think he seems like a very good person, a relatively humble person in a lot of ways, and he has his best intentions in mind for his players and the people around him. So I respect him as a human. But in the end, that's not the end all be all in that business. In NFL head coaching, it's winning. And when you have Josh Allen, and the way I've tried to describe Josh Allen to those who might not know, he's a Ferrari. Sean McDermott has the keys to the Ferrari, but he doesn't know how to drive stick shift. Plain and simple, that's what it is. Sean McDermott is not the guy. He should have been gone 2 to 3 seasons ago because it became very evident he wasn't going to be the guy. So people getting all pissed off now that he got fired, he's had 2 to 3 bonus seasons to get it done and didn't. So he's been on a long leash for long enough. It was time to go. Now, when it comes to Brandon Beane and him getting promoted, it's essentially just a reshuffling of the organizational chart. He's not really being promoted. If he was being promoted, he'd be hiring a GM under him, which I thought he would. So it would go Terry Pegula at the top, Brandon Beane, president of football operations, then a GM and head coach or GM and head coach. But from what was stated in the press conference today, Brandon Beane is president of football operations and GM. So it's really not he's not promoted as much as it's the organizational chart is shifting to where instead of the head coach and GM being one and the same, and they both report directly to Pegula, now it's going to be they report the head coach, whoever that will be, will report to Brandon Beane. I don't necessarily consider that a promotion. I honestly thought he would be hiring a new GM like a Terrence Gray or Brian Gaines, who are his assistant GMs. I thought that would be the play. But when asked at the press conference, he was adamant that he was going to stay the GM. So that was something I was definitely wrong about. I thought for sure that's what would happen. But I don't think he's a great talent evaluator, but I do think he's a good sports executive. And, I don't know if maybe down the road they'll have it to where whether it's Brian Gaines or Terrence Gray, both those guys have more say as maybe co-GMs or something. I don't know. But I was surprised to hear that he's going to stay as the full-on GM in addition to his president of football operations title as well. Now, this press conference was interesting to say the least. I do think Terry Pegula, I understand where some people are not appreciating the way he kind of threw Keon Coleman under the bus. There are a lot of people saying that the fact that Terry Pegula has not answered questions at a press conference since 2019, that's a benefit to the team, and that any goodwill this team had within the fan base and within the NFL in terms of attracting potential head coaches has been squashed because of this press conference. I think that's ridiculous. And look, I'm a diehard Bills fan, have been for 35 years, but sports fans in general, but Bills fans, I can speak for, are unhinged a lot of times and get way too much into their feelings. And when they get into their feelings, they're not thinking right. Okay. And look, I'm certainly not completely adverse to doing that from time to time, but I think the way Bills fans react oftentimes is a little over the top. And I think the reaction, how this has been going, just adds to that. I think people attacking Brandon Beane as if he was some puppet master who was controlling Terry Pegula and coerced him to fire McDermott. That's ridiculous. I think all you've ever heard prior to this about Brandon Beane is that he runs a good organization. I know some people got bent out of shape about the last year or last spring. He had the argument with the WGR radio guys in Buffalo, and he did come off kind of poor on that, I thought, no doubt about it. But I can understand where he's coming from to a degree, constantly getting flack from these media heads and things like that. I did think he handled that incorrectly and kind of took what he heard wrong, because I didn't think Joe and Jeremy were bashing him quite as much as he felt in that moment. But I don't think that negates all the good he's done in Buffalo as a human and within that organization. You hear a lot of great things about Brandon Beane. That's the one knock I've heard of him in the 9 years he's been with this organization. So to negate all the good he's done over one weird radio incident that he was kind of hot under the collar, I think is ridiculous. Again, taking things and blowing it out of proportion like most sports fans tend to do. Going to the Keon Coleman thing, where Terry Pegula essentially dropped a bombshell by kind of undermining a lot of people within the Bills organization. When a reporter asked Brandon Beane about the receiving core and why they're so lackluster, why they've struggled, why he has struggled to draft and sign free agent receivers that give Josh that real target. Pegula interrupted. He said, "Can I interrupt? I'll address the Keon situation. The coaching staff pushed to draft Keon. I'm not saying Brandon wouldn't have drafted him, but he wasn't his next choice. That was Brandon being a team player and taking advice of his coaching staff who felt strongly about the player. He's taken, for some reason, heat over it and not saying a word about it, but I'm here to tell you the true story. Now, to Brandon's, I think in that moment, Terry Pegula didn't do a good job of explaining that situation. And to his credit, Brandon Beane later reiterated that, yes, that was my pick. I wouldn't have made that pick if I didn't believe in Keon Coleman. And that, there's discrepancies between what coaches want and what personnel want, things like that. But I do understand how that comes off kind of poor from Pegula's standpoint, but he was trying to stick up for his GM, and his GM is also then trying to stick up for his own pick and his rationale within the organization for that pick, which has yet to work out. Side note, I would have preferred Brian Thomas Jr. Or Xavier Legette, or maybe even Lad McConkey, but I really wanted Cooper DeJean then. But hey, Brandon Beane hasn't asked me for my opinion in these 9 years, but maybe he will going forward. And then when it comes to Pegula firing McDermott over one game, and also kind of saying that the Bills were screwed out of that win by the catch or the non-catch call where Brandon Cooks went up for the catch and it got intercepted. And we've all seen the dissection of that play. And was it a catch? Wasn't it? As far as I'm concerned, it wasn't. And people comparing that to the Cole Bishop and Xavier Worthy play from last year, two different plays, and both can be similar but be called in different ways. So to me, the Cole Bishop Xavier Worthy play last year against the Chiefs that really screwed the Bills, that should not have been a catch. And the Brandon Cooks and McMillan or whatever his name was for the Broncos, that was not a catch by Brandon Cooks. He was not down by contact. Now I know that in the last few years I've gotten to the point where I don't even know what the hell a catch is in the NFL anymore. I really don't. I have no idea. But what I would deem to be a catch, from me personally, not what the rule book and all the clutter, Brandon Cooks didn't catch that ball. Plain and simple. And I hate to say it because it kills us, but it's the reality. He didn't catch it. And then those comparing that catch with Brandon Cooks to the Devontae Adams catch with the Rams and the Bears, totally different play. To compare the two, absolutely ridiculous. And I think the thing people need to realize is that it really wasn't just because the Bills lost this game to the Broncos. I think that was the final straw or the cherry on top. And maybe Pegula didn't explain that well. But as far as I'm concerned, it's 2 to 3 years too late. And so for whatever the reason, whether people want to say Pegula's talking out of two sides of his mouth where he fired Sean because of this loss, but the Bills also got screwed out of this game, so thus they shouldn't have lost. You're missing the point. He should have been fired. It's unfortunate, again, as a good man, but he wasn't going to be the guy that gets it done. Now, going back to that catch, I'm really glad to see somebody who actually knows a little bit about gridiron ball, Joe Burrow. He had a tweet saying the amount of people that don't understand what a catch is in the rule book flabbergasts me, and it's not the officials. The two plays yesterday, meaning the Devontae Adams play I mentioned and the Brandon Cooks play, the two plays yesterday were not difficult calls, and they got them both right. 100%. Joey B knows what's up, and that was absolutely correct. And not to stick up for Brandon Beane too much, but there's also people that are saying that when Brandon Beane leans on the it's difficult to build a team when you have a contract like Josh's, and saying that that's not a valid criticism, that's absolutely ridiculous. And to say that you don't have to sacrifice in certain areas to be able to pay Josh this kind of money that he's getting, $330 million over 6 years. Yeah, that's going to hit the budget a little hard. That's going to hit the salary cap. And if you look at the 2025 quarterback cap hit rankings, I'm looking at them right now on Spot Track. Josh is 10th at $36.3 million. Let's look at the top 9. That's Dak Prescott, number 1, didn't make the playoffs. Matthew Stafford signed a 2-year deal of $84 million. His cap hit's $47 million. They made it. Joe Burrow, $46 million, didn't make it. Now, granted, part of that is due to his injury, but they didn't make it. They don't have any money to build a defense or an O-line. if you've watched the Bengals, all you see that Joey B's running for his life, and they have no defense. There's a reason he missed so much of this season. Is because he doesn't have a line in front of him to protect him. Why? Because so much of the money is going to one player. Well, three players with them because of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Fourth, Lamar Jackson, $43.5 million, didn't make the playoffs. 43.3 million. Kyler Murray, Arizona didn't even come close to sniffing the playoffs. 6, Geno Smith, $40 million, number 1 overall pick. 7, Kirk Cousins, $40 million. Atlanta, he wasn't even the starter, and they didn't make it to the playoffs. $39 million. Tua in Miami, 8th, didn't make the playoffs. Justin Herbert, number 9, they made the playoffs. Josh Allen. Okay, so there's a lot of quarterbacks on this list that didn't even make the playoffs. So to say that cap hit is not a burden is absolutely ridiculous. And next year, his cap hit, Josh Allen's, goes up to $56.3 million. That's $20 million more than this year. So they're going to have to play with the numbers to even try and sign guys. So yes, you can blame Brandon Beane for roster construction, which I think this was definitely on paper the poorest team I've seen in 5 years of the Buffalo Bills. But to act like that doesn't play a part in it is absolutely obscene. I mean, the only way you could say that would be if you're the Eagles, but the Eagles are going to be in cap hell in the next few years because they're kicking, not to get too much in the weeds, but they have a lot of void years on players where they have tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars invested in players that won't even be on the team over a few year span. And that's going to eat up a chunk of their salary cap. So to act like that's not going to be a problem for them in a few years is bananas. To act like that's not a problem right now for the Buffalo Bills is just wrong. And people need to understand that. Last thing I'll say about this is that one way or the other, however it was handled, right, wrong, the Bills management is getting a lot of flack for not handling this well in terms of, they didn't feel like they showed McDermott enough respect. There wasn't enough social media thank you and a video video thank you and farewell and all that stuff to McDermott. You can go at that, I guess, if you want to nitpick. But in the end, again, he got 2 to 3 years more than he should have. A new guy needs to come in and utilize Josh Allen. Utilize that Ferrari, that once-in-a-generation guy. We waited 20 years to get a quarterback after Jim Kelly retired. 20 years. And in 9 years, Sean McDermott could not get this freaking team to the gosh darn Super Bowl. Here's the stat that sums up why Sean McDermott got fired. 4 teams in the history of the Super Bowl era have been to the playoffs and won 1 playoff game in 6 consecutive seasons. 4, okay? So the Bills made the playoffs in 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, and 20, and won 1 game, at least 1 game, in each of those years. So it's a rare feat that only 4 teams have accomplished that. So, for instance, the NFL, the top 2 seeds from last year, the AFC number 1 seed, the Kansas City Chiefs, didn't even make the playoffs this year. Number 1 seed in the NFC last year, the Detroit Lions, didn't even make the playoffs this year. So it shows how difficult it is to make the playoffs, let alone win a game, let alone do it 6 years in a row. So credit to McDermott for that. However, of the 4 teams that have accomplished this in the history of the Super Bowl era, the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Bills, only one of those teams has not went to a Super Bowl. Only one of those teams has not won a Super Bowl in that 6-year span. And only one of those teams has not won 3 Super Bowls in that said 6-year span. That team is the Buffalo Bills. That's why Sean McDermott got fired. And that's why he deserved to get fired. Plain and simple. The Chiefs, Patriots, Cowboys are the only 3 other teams to have done it. All 3 of them have 3 rings in that 6-year span. The Bills have nothing to show for it but 2 conference championship appearances. That's it. So the discrepancy from those teams to this current 6-year Bills team is why Sean McDermott got fired. If you're not on board with McDermott getting fired, you're the problem. Plain and simple. He was not going to get it done. I applaud Pegula and Beane for having the balls to pull the trigger on a guy who's won over 60% of his games. I believe it's closer to like 65% or so. To have the balls to pull the trigger and go, that's not enough. That's not good enough. And it's certainly not good enough when we have Josh Allen. So good on them. Maybe they didn't handle it well. Sure, they can all do things better, but so can I in life, and so can you. In the end, Sean McDermott moving on and not being the coach of this team is the fork in the road that we needed. Now, it's up to Beane, Pegula, and company to hire the right guy to bring the best out of this team in Josh Allen. My hope is that it's an offensive-minded guy. I have a few players or coaches in mind. I'll get into that later. But ultimately, thank you, Sean McDermott, for what you did to get this team out of the dumpster fire it was in before you got here. But I'm not sad to see you go. And all of us as Bills fans should be happy that Terry Pegula had the guts to pull the trigger and fire him or relieve him of his duties, or however you want to put it, and look to get somebody new to steer this team in the right direction and win a Super Bowl. Go Bills.